Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My sincerest apologies if there's any background noise. My neighbor is mowing their lawn for the 10th time this week and I really can't do anything about it besides steal his lawnmower, but I believe that's a felony. But regardless, today's record review is going to be on the new solo album from singer-songwriter Hayley Williams of Paramore fame, titled Petals for Armor. So I really didn't have high hopes going into this album because I think that we can all agree that an album's release cycle can say a lot about the quality of the actual music that we're going to be receiving. This album had a total of 10 different singles released on 2 different EPs, which is the first red flag, and it's also just kind of annoying because if you want to hear all of the singles, you've already spoiled 2/3 of the album for yourself. The album was also delayed, which is the second red flag, so you've pretty much checked every box for this shouldn't be very good. I do also want to say that I didn't hear any singles. They were pretty easy to dodge. So I decided that I would just go into this blind when it came out, and that is what I did. But I do have to give her some credit where credit is due because the 5 remaining tracks are actual songs. So, I mean, 5 isn't a hugely large number in comparison, but these are fairly long tracks. There is a sizable amount of content outside of what was already released. And I was kind of eating my words a little bit upon hearing this album in its full length for the first time. I think that breaking this down into 3 different EPs like she's going to do, as the last set of 5 tracks is going to be released as part 3 to this, might actually be the better way to listen to it. With a fairly sizable runtime, I think that it can be a little bit of a tiring listen at almost an hour long, but breaking it down into more bite-sized chunks like this can make it a lot easier to process. So really now, considering the fact that it doesn't nag me at all, what really matters here is the quality of the music rather than the release itself. Musically, a lot of this record isn't necessarily predictable in a typical sense, but it might be exactly what you're expecting from the Paramore singer after the last Paramore album, After Laughter. This does vary from After Laughter in a lot of ways though too, because After Laughter definitely had one foot in a pop sound, but also had the other foot in the pop punk sound that Paramore fans had come to know and love. This album varies a lot in the way that it doesn't entirely, completely ditch the rock sound, but it mostly does in favor of a pop musical style. The core of these songs is where almost every song remains somewhat the same, remains consistent from track to track, is this very steady bass line, some very nice bass playing across this all really, and some solid, steady, punchy percussion. I guess you could kind of call this the canvas that the rest of the album paints upon, because everything that's on top of this really has a lot more variety and creativity. Hayley pulls from dance pop on tracks like Why We Ever and Sudden Desire. There are also far more mellow acoustic tracks like the haunting Leave It Alone or the very sweet My Friend. It also does pull from rock-centric ideas that I previously mentioned on the very furious track that is Creepin, and the most Paramore sounding track on the album probably being Over Yet. There are plenty of oddball moments too, whether that be full songs or just quick moments. Just look at the intro to Simmer, where Hayley is pretty much doing her best attempt at beatboxing. Much later on the album, there is the very Lady Gaga inspired Sugar on the Rim, which stands out like a sore thumb in the track listing, not necessarily as a bad song, but as one of the weirder ones here. The use of electronic sampling and atypical mixing also help the album find very interesting sounds too. One of the best examples of this very phenomena is the track Cinnamon, which uses very skewed repeated vocal samples and has a steady but uncertain atmosphere. The thing that I want to stress is that this album doesn't bore me at any points, which is really astonishing for an album like this. Going into it, I would really think that at its nearly hour-long runtime, I would become somewhat disinterested at some point or another. All that being said, I don't really know how many people are going to latch onto this album because of its sound. I think that a lot more people are going to find a lot more enjoyment in the lyricism that this album holds. I feel like a lot of what Hayley wrote on this album is very personal to her, and that shines through a lot. A lot of past trauma from a previous relationship is brought up on here, and this is addressed so blatantly, unapologetically. It really shows Hayley getting into a more hostile side, I guess. This is best done on the opening track, Simmer, especially on the second verse where she really reaches into an aggressive attitude to describe this situation. Hayley talks a lot about depression on this album too, and her ways of dealing with darker thoughts. Cinnamon is a really great example of this because she starts the song off talking very relatably about situations where she's alone, feels lonely, feels like she needs to make a connection with another person, but she eventually finds solitude in her loneliness later on in the track. While these two thematic instances do hold a lot of the album together, there is a much less depressive and much brighter side of this album that is demonstrated mostly on the third part of it. Hayley seems to be coming into a much more happy state as the album progresses, and this is certainly evident on the much happier relationship-based tracks, My Friend and Taken. It is very evident that she is seeing the brighter side of things in the last three tracks of this album too, which really does bring some cohesion to it. It shows some progression of mood from the start to finish. My biggest lyrical grievance, though, actually is when the album gets a little bit too bright and cheery for its own good. The biggest ones that I would describe in this way is Over Yet and Watch Me While I Bloom, which really sounds somewhat sickeningly sweet to begin with, but really just kind of lyrically read as a motivational poster that you'd find in an educational setting. These tracks do seem like they could be considered empowering. I think they come across just a little bit too strong sometimes. One form of empowerment that she does demonstrate very well is the somewhat nuanced themes of female empowerment all throughout the course of the record. This is mostly evident in Metaphors and is strongly represented on the Boy Genius assisted Roses, Lotus, Violet, Iris, which is kind of a mouthful, like damn. This is one subtle but certainly present narrative that is definitely demonstrated through the whole track listing when you look a little bit more closely at it. So, all in all, variety is a big keyword that I want to stress. And in its purest form, variety can cause the death of cohesion, but I don't think that's really what happens on here. As I said, this has a very progressive mood from start to finish. I wouldn't call this anything like a concept album or anything really that solid, but it does still feel like it fits together well, and it's not just completely all over the place. While she does usually dodge inconsistencies, I want to repeat what I said about the fact that she is bringing this into 3 different EPs. I wish she would have done a little bit more with this and kind of focused a little bit on a singular topic on each one of the 3 EPs. Might make them feel like more solid listens on their own rather as part of a series and just merely that, because I think that these are all just kind of a mixed bag in their own right. But that does bring to attention the fact that I got any kind of enjoyment out of a record that was broken down in this way, and really that's kind of a miracle on its own. Overall, I'm feeling about a 7 out of 10 on this one. So let me know what you thought of this album down in the comment section below. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Drop a like on the video if you did like what you saw today, and hit the subscribe button and turn the bell on for notifications if you want more music related content coming your way very, very soon. But that is just about going to wrap it up for this one, and I will see you in the next video.